All right, so we are recording and your meeting is live. So why don't we do a roll call? I'm going to actually ask everybody to identify themselves. I'm going to go with the panels on my screen, and in the upper left-hand corner of my screen is Kristen Johnson.
Kristen Johnson.
Henry, you're next.
Henry Thayer.
David.
Dave Fonaro.
Lauren.
Lauren Weinstock.
Roland.
Roland Benjamin.
Susan. And Jonathan.
Jonathan Daly LaBelle.
Jonathan and Susan, just before you came in, I was explaining that we were having some technical difficulties with production previously. So we didn't get them out, but I do have a set of meeting minutes. It will not take very long to go through. If you don't mind my sharing, you can sort of see them real time. So I'm gonna pull that up. I did not have the transcript. I'm operating from memory here. The attendee list for that meeting, I've got Henry Thayer, Kristen Johnson, Jason Ralph, David, and who else was at that meeting? Henry or Kristen?
Susan was there.
No, Susan was not at the last meeting.
Yeah.
Yes, I
Not
was.
July 2nd. Susan, you were in attendance on July 2nd? Okay.
I think so. I have notes from the meeting. So
From the July 2nd meeting.
Yeah, I think Susan was there.
Okay.
wasn't that the meeting when we talked about governance?
Well, you've talked about governance for 3 meetings.
No, I have July 2nd meeting minutes.
Okay, good.
I was
That's great.
there. Thank you, Kristen.
I think Jason Ralph was also present.
He was.
Oh, you have him. I'm sorry. I was looking at something else. So there we go.
I was there, yeah.
Yeah.
You're going to have to help me with the spelling, Jonathan.
-LA.
Yeah. LLE. There's only one H in Jonathan.
I got the first one. Yeah.
Okay. Anyone else that I've missed? Okay. These will be the meeting minutes of July 2nd, not meeting minutes for the previous meeting were approved, and that's the meeting at which Susan. So let me just correct that. Does anybody recall off the top of their head what the previous meeting was? It was
April 28th.
no, it was a June meeting. Is that not right?
We were supposed to meet in June and then it got moved to July 2nd. So and then May didn't happen. So I think it would be in April.
It was the April 28th meeting. Those meeting minutes were considered and were approved. There was no correspondence or comment. The discussion really collapsed the 3 items: the governance, the mission, and the coordination with other committees. The discussion centered around Mr. Thayer's presentation, and I've bulleted his PowerPoint presentation here. It's a simplest expression of what was discussed. Discussion of the tax calculator was tabled, and discussion of need for a repository was also tabled. There was some discussion about COVID-19. David, was there anything in particular that you want to have reflected? You and Jason carried most of this portion of the conversation as I remember it.
I don't recall having any more input on that more than anybody else did.
Okay. It really was just a pretty general conversation.
I think what we talked about was that we don't have information, very much information for, you don't have to write this down, but I'm just going to say, we get the information from the state. It's done at a county level. And so we don't really have very much information that's specific to South Kingstown. That's what I remember from that discussion.
Yeah,
And that doesn't need to be said.
right. I think this is a fair, albeit a very global representation of what was discussed in that meeting.
Can you tell from the tape what time the meeting was adjourned?
Yes, I will be able to fill that in when we get that tape. Colleen's got to clean it up and send it to me tomorrow. I would ask that the committee approve the meeting minutes of that last meeting with direction that I fill in the adjournment time when that can be discerned from the tape.
Well, wait a minute. There is one thing we did. I don't know whether this matters either, but we did decide with respect to Henry's proposal that we wanted to wait until we had a broader representation of committee members here.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay,
The committee tabled
Yep.
action on the proposal until the next meeting so that all members.
thank you.
All right. So I'd ask for a motion to approve.
Motion to approve the minutes of the July 2nd meeting.
Can we get a second on that?
Second that motion.
Okay. Any opposed? Good. All right, so I'll make that addition at the end as soon as I've got the tape tomorrow morning, and we'll post those. And I'm going to stop sharing. And with that, I think that brings us to discussion about governance again. Henry, you want to take it away? You want me to pull your slides back up? What do you want to do?
Yeah, could you please pull those slides up?
Yeah. Are you seeing that?
I'm going to share.
No.
You see it now?
Yep.
Okay.
All right, first slide. Okay. As far as the Robert's Rules of Order, that's the standard. I think that all of the committees use in town. The chairman, it could be chair, whatever you'd like it to be, elected for a 1 or 2 year term, may be reelected. Duties are maintains order in the meeting, sets the committee's order of meetings and discussion with input from members, ensures that agendas and minutes are published, and makes reports to the town council. Vice chair substitutes for the chair when unavailable. And I had this idea of a chief technologist, maintains technology stack for reporting. So any comment on this or addition, the deletions, whatever?
One question.
I'd just like to suggest that we again revisit the chief technologist role, which to me seems very, very time intensive. And I know Jason was interested in supporting some of that, but I think that we might want to consider some sort of division of labor in terms of data management structures. It is likely that, particularly given the way in which the scope of repositories exist, that this is not as simple as merging data sets using software, and that there are some issues associated with temporal, unit, and other types of structures that would benefit from a broader discussion of the structure of the data. So I think it's going to be a really big job depending on what's there. So I think we might want to have maybe 1 or 2 people who are a subcommittee or someone who is potentially responsible for assigning that, but I think it's too big of a job for a single person. I work with a lot of municipal level and governance and demographic data, and this is going to be challenging to make it all structured in a way that's accessible. And I'm guessing that even some of the older data isn't in formats that would easily be transferred even. So I think there's an element of the data structure that might benefit from multiple people being involved.
Yeah, because ultimately what we want to do is get our data into a spreadsheet format. So using, row column manipulation, either with Access or Excel, we could come up with our reports. So it's a big extract, sort, select.
Well, it
For
seems
now, it's okay just to have, one position identified as a leadership position there, with the anticipation that everybody on the committee to some extent will contribute to that effort. And maybe as we get into it and the needs become more clear, maybe then we could develop some more formal positions.
Yeah, I like that, Dave.
also that could also just say that we don't need that position, that's something that comes and goes as we need it and is assigned to different people depending on what the needs are. So it's just not, it's sort of what everybody is supposed to be doing. So I don't know.
Well, and I think that if we're really being true to the spirit of the committee, from my perspective, this is not all going to be quantitative data that's reported in the same way. There's different data structures, right? Different types of artifacts or evidence. And so my best assessment of this is we're not looking at, in an ideal world, you would have a single spreadsheet, but I don't think that's possible here. There might be a code book or a data dictionary that enables the assessment and evaluation of different types of issues, but we're going to talk, when I talk about different temporal periods, we have data that are likely, even from the state, if we're integrating things that are annual, that are biannual, that are monthly, that are every 3rd year, every 5th year, or the interpolations of those units. And so I'm a little cautious about, I think we should try to have a marriage of what's there, but I do really like Susan's suggestion that perhaps this is something that varies based on the time and expertise of the committee, because it is also useful to share the load a little. So
yeah,
I think I kind of agree with that. We don't really. Is there a technology stack to be maintained right now? I mean, we know what there's a lot of information out there, but I don't even think we've really talked as a committee of what we're going to have available or try to make available. Until we have that, then maybe it is a position in a subcommittee that comes when there's something that needs an active maintenance. But I don't know if we want to appoint it or elect it even right now as a group. As far as the other, it's pretty standard. One of the things I just was looking at as a chair is that there's a first time. It's almost easier to look at these committees, and I've sat on some in different areas, to just have them coincide with election cycles. And maybe at this point we could be looking at just making the term a 2-year term, and this first selection that we might make would begin in November, but has also serves for the remainder of this next couple months, which is probably 2 or 3 meetings between now and November. So anyway, just thought.
Yeah, I was just going to piggyback off of what Kristen said. I think it's true. There's going to be the nature of the data and what's available to us is going to be really variable. And the idea of a data dictionary to me is critical, because not just in terms of us documenting what we have and operationalizing what the variables are in each of these data sets, but also as there's turnover on the committee, you know, this committee presumably will have a life and we won't always be on it. And there needs to be some documentation so that it can get handed off and that people understand what they're getting and they don't have to figure it all out on their own. So really, in some ways, to me, whoever this person is, whether it's all of us or however we want to structure it, it's really, to me, before you even get to the data, you need to document what the data are. And that's maintaining the data dictionary is a really important piece of this.
Yep.
On the governance, I mean, first, you know, just to say again, you know, thank you, Henry, for stepping forward with this, because it's kind of a position nobody really jumped to. So kudos to you on that. But I think with the committee's order of meetings and discussion, I mean, that's kind of what we've been talking about a lot for these number of meetings. So I'm just wondering, in the parentheses, I guess I might like to see something arrived at collaboratively with other members, just so that it's kind of clear based upon previous discussion that it's really a group effort, and Henry's really, you know, kind of maintaining the order, and he is would be running the meeting if we go with this route. I don't know what people think about that.
Can I add something that I think is a really critical piggyback on what Jonathan just said that came out of our last meeting, which was this notion that we might want to invite the different committees to share their needs and then assess what we could do based on the available data. And that would determine some sort of communication with that, and the town council would determine the scope and agenda of the committee. I mean, certainly there needs to be a realistic ranking of, you know, we can't do everything every time. And so some sort of needs-based assessment or prioritization of information that would help guide and shape and frame evaluation materials. But I think the really big piece from my perspective that I am the very sticky, bring it up every meeting person on is, I think that we really need to have this be driven by the needs of the governance structure of the town rather than by the interests and experience of the committee. So we did have a really long discussion about that, and I think David had a really useful suggestion that was to try to have some prioritization from the other committees on what do they need to know in order to be able to effectively evaluate the types of challenges that they're managing. But this really, instead of the committee determining what our agenda is, we are creating our agenda out of the needs of the town. So we're a service, support, information, evaluation, analysis committee.
Yeah, one thing that I had added to that when we had that discussion was just that I basically agree with that, but didn't want to rule out the capability of us to suggest ideas of areas for study, to suggest to the town council or to other committees, and then let them decide, you know, if they're important to pursue and sort of reflect it back upon us as a task. You know, so maybe we wouldn't, as you say, set our agenda, but we all see needs and might have ideas of things that could be of value that we could suggest to the town council or other committees, and then they could determine whether or not they agree there's value and want that to be studied more deeply.
David, my experience has been, if you went to the town council and you said to them, what do you think, what are your needs? And they're going to come back to us and say, well, what should they be? You know, it's, you know, because the town council is political, you know, and it doesn't mean that the members are all that astute in technology and how to manipulate data and statistics. and reach conclusions from that. So, yeah, our experience has been is, well, what do you think we should do? Yeah, okay.
Well, maybe other committees would have a more clear idea of
Yeah.
types of information they need, not so much the town council.
As you get into technical committees like zoning, planning, economic development, affordable housing, or whatever, they're going to have very specific ideas. I know that the Economic Development Commission, which both Susan and I are members of, we've had some very, very specific needs that we wanted to gather statistics on, to the point of going out and doing surveys.
So if I may, I actually think I'm hearing three different sort of buckets of work that could be assigned to a lead on the committee. You know, three different leads. You have sort of a data maven or a municipal data liaison. You have the organizer of the meetings, the sort of committee housekeeper. And you've got this coordination with other committees and sort of meta organizer, trying to figure out what the problems are throughout town and bringing those back to the committee. Those really would be interesting reports, I think. If you had someone doing those things between meetings, I think you generate the stuff that productive meetings come from.
Mm-hmm.
So I think you're identifying these things that need to be done, and I think having someone who's just sort of pushing that along during the course of a month helps make the meetings useful. I just an observation.
It's almost like a sponsor of the effort.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, so where does this leave us?
Well, you still have to decide whether you're going to have a chair, a vice chair, and anybody else. You know, whether it's a chief technologist or data scientist or whatever.
It sounds like we're taking the chief technologist off. And I don't know, from what Rob just said, you know, that's my view, but I think that's what we've discussed more or less. And from what Rob just described, do we want a chair, or do we want people who are on the committee who are assigned different aspects of what the committee's mission is going to be, to try to work? You know, I don't know. I liked your idea of just having the person who sort of takes care of the meeting, but then somebody else who, or possibly other people who are reaching out to there are a lot of town committees. That's going to be a big job for one person to do. Somebody has to sort of think about an order in which to, I don't know. It sounds to me like we maybe we ought to be thinking more about the mission statement, and then just assign a couple of sort of janitorial tasks that get done in between. They aren't janitorial, but supervisory tasks that get done in between the meetings, and skip this chair and vice chair stuff altogether.
The danger with not having someone or some bodies who have, you know, these responsibilities that Henry's outlined is that you're relying on me.
No, as I said that, part of what we don't want to have to do, Rob, is to rely on you, with all due respect. We want to try.
No, that's right. It's not really
off you.
It's not a viable long-term option.
Right. But I still don't know that it's, I still don't know whether, I guess it'd feel more comfortable if we really kind of got into the meat of what we're doing more, so that then it would it would describe what kinds of tasks are needed between these meetings. It's very frustrating for me on the Economic Development Committee, for instance, that so little gets done in between the meetings, and I hope we're not going to fall into that category. So it would be good to define the jobs that need to be done in between the meetings, but that maybe doesn't, I mean, maybe there's just one person who kind of coordinates all that, who's
Right.
not the chair, but who makes sure that those tasks get done, but those tasks are given out to the rest of us to
So,
make progress on the month.
so one way to do this might be to have a set of coordinators. Maybe it's a meeting coordinator, one person whose responsibility is to coordinate the meeting, make sure that the meeting minutes get out to everybody on time, make sure that the agenda contains the items that folks said they wanted to talk about, and if there's any memos or anything related to that that have to be presented to the committee beforehand, make sure that those get done. So the meeting coordinator. There is perhaps a coordinator with the town. Maybe it's the committees and boards coordinator. You know, what are the, somebody's sending an email every once in a while out to the various committees and saying, hey, we haven't heard from you guys lately. What's going on? Have you got any interesting issues that you'd like some help on, that kind of thing. And then maybe there is a data coordinator is a tough, I mean, this chief technologist concept is an important one. It's a really hard one because it just doesn't exist. This committee is breaking new ground when we think about how to get citizens knee deep in municipal data. This is different. This is new. This is not something that gets done. But I like the idea of somebody on the committee being responsible for and having the authority, having, you know, the ability to just call up and say, hey, you know, I'm the coordinator for data collection on the committee. What do you guys have? Or, you know, we haven't seen an update in this data set for a while. What's going on there? That is something that would be helpful. That would be a useful coordination function for the committee. And these are, I guess, in some ways just interfaces. These are the people who are gonna, you know, sort of talk to the committees, talk to this committee, the one organizing, making sure that the memos and the agendas get out, and talking with the administration.
Yeah.
Somebody is the face in each of those conversations, and it can't be everybody who is the face in each of those conversations. That's not workable.
That's true.
I kind of like the division of committee responsibility by task, because I think it forces forward movement. It, rather than having an abstract structure, there are deliverables that are associated with the role. And so I think that a lot of very specific strategy conversations then are possible about how best to begin those roles. And then there's the ability to execute before the next meeting and have report out by the designated person to do the coordinating or interfacing. And I do find that to be particularly useful, given that I'm guessing that everybody has lots of competing demands. And so it's very easy to get stuck in an abstract conversation where we're talking about hypotheticals rather than moving on to this task-based structure. So I find that suggestion particularly useful, as long as there's a clear delineation of what, you know, where people are going with that.
I had a kind of a thought on almost this whole thing, how it might play out, whatever we call these, whether it's a meeting coordinator or not. That really defines almost a generic chair's role anyway. It really is an administrative facilitator more than it is a kind of a leadership thing. But rather than have hard hierarchy of titles, I guess, on the committee. Set an agenda that is structured. So I really just jotted down 3 ideas and just say, if our meeting was broken up into 3 sections, where one is just, I'm going to do them backwards because the first one can't happen until we did a prior meeting with the third one. But the third one would, the end of every meeting would be, all right, what is each member going to do next? And it might be as simple as, Roland, you're going to talk to the Economic Development Committee chair and see what, and attend a meeting and whatever, and bring some notes back to the next meeting and say, here's the things that we're seeing economic development would do. And then David might be tasked with either communicating with another subcommittee in town or identifying data sources and vetting data sources. And each one of those things gets hashed out at the end of each meeting. Now, the rest of the structure of the meeting would be the first section, just say, all right, everybody come back with your homework. And then the meat of the meeting would be, all right, we now have all this discussion about different things. What can we do in this meeting now to say, all right, let's finish this? Or we can't handle what zoning's dealing with right now in an hour of a SMART meeting, but we can handle identifying data sources for EDC to lean on. And that's it. And it really just, so rather than have somebody be the meeting coordinator, it is just the chair. The chair says, here's our 3 agenda items. And then there's a task list that comes out of it at the end of each meeting that gets reviewed at the beginning of the next. And it really just functionally has simple flow. I don't know.
I like the simplicity of that. I think that for a committee of 9 people, I don't know that we really need 3 or 4 positions, although I think what you've got there, Rob, looks fine. But I do like the simplicity of just having a meeting coordinator, call them the chair if you want, and then delegation of tasks on a meeting by meeting basis, or delegation of projects, or call them subcommittees if you want, that we create and disband as we need. Another thought I had, which is sort of unrelated to that, is I think it was Kristen maybe observed that it's going to take more than one person to coordinate or communicate with all the other committees. And I didn't know if it might make sense to do some of that based upon personal contacts, if members of this committee know members of other committees or chairs of other committees that could facilitate dialogue.
I personally like not naming a chair, just because I think we want to try to do something different, and chair is just too old-fashioned. And so I like the idea of meeting coordinator in the place of a chair, and then we can do whatever, the idea of establishing and reestablishing people's assignments as we go is fine. So we just have a sort of a administrator.
So what's the risk with that, Bob?
The risk of what?
The council itself is pretty much dialed into the old-fashioned organizational structure.
Yeah. I don't think
And the risk is that they won't know who they won't be able to figure it out,
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, there's a couple of committees that have co-chairs. I don't know of any committee that doesn't have the title chair, but I don't think that's, because the council's ever expressed any concern about that. I think it's just habit. I don't think there's any danger in, if you wanted to call it the Grand Poobah and go back to the Flintstones title, you could do it. I don't think it matters.
Okay, just as long as you don't see any risk or any potential for confusion, then we can move ahead.
So is that the only person we're naming, the meeting coordinator?
So I think it might be useful before we do designate a data centralization person to figure out what's the scope and scale of that task. I'm really concerned about burying somebody, honestly.
Yeah.
I am. And I think that having these kinds of applied strategies where we're working it out in real time is going to avoid the creation of really uneven workload based on a moment of goodwill. And so I think in some of these, like I do think having an alternate coordinator is a good idea. If the convener is not available, it's useful to have an alternate so that Rob, you're not our alternate. But I do think that it would be useful, given the unique nature of this committee, to look at what we're doing before we're assigning additional formal roles. Because what we're thinking that we'll need and what we actually end up executing are potentially pretty far apart here. And I don't know. I mean, I really see us spending a lot of time in the weeds with the data in ways that are much messier than we anticipate. Again, though, I work with a lot of really messy subnational data sets. And so I'm not saying our data looks like that, but it could be a big lift. So my 2 cents.
Okay, well, so in the interest of getting on to some of that, why don't we say, Rob, you could take the out in that sentence. The meeting, the one you just is not available, steps.
Yeah.
Yeah. Why don't we just say this is it? Why don't we say there. Why don't we say elected for a 2-year term, may be reelected, maintains orders, sets the, I'd take out the sets the committee's orders of meetings, because that's going to be done more at the committee level. Ensures the agendas and the minutes are published. And I mean, if that person is to be the person who makes the reports to the town council, so be it. But I don't think that's right either, because I think it should be, if some subset of people have been the ones who are working on the development of whatever it needs that get reported out to the town council, that's the person, not the coordinator, who should do it. So I would take that last bullet out, and I would say, let's move on to something else.
Sounds good.
Okay. While you're on this, do you want to actually elect a meeting coordinator?
Well, Henry, are you still interested in it now that we're not calling it chair?
Yes. I'm used to multiple different titles to do multiple different things.
Well, so does that take care of it?
I'll nominate Henry Thayer to be meeting coordinator as described.
I'll second that nomination.
Do we need an alternate coordinator? Oh,
Take a vote on that.
This one first.
oh, okay.
Is there anyone opposed to the nomination? Okay, Henry, you can take this meeting over.
Well, let's do the alternate coordinator. Roland, is that something you'd be interested in doing?
I'm comfortable doing it, but I'm a pretty polarizing figure in town, so I'd also be comfortable stepping aside if anybody had any concerns.
You're not rolling. You're not polarizing.
Well, I don't know. We just need somebody to step forward and do it. David, do you want to do it?
I just got elected president of another organization, and I'm hesitant to take on another formal role. So I probably would prefer not to, if that's all right.
Jonathan, what about you?
I was thinking Susan would be a natural for that position.
No, Susan's too old. She's aged
No.
everything.
Don't be ageist.
You're not old at heart, though. You're the progressive thinker who wants to ditch all the old titles.
I'm not old at heart, but I'm old. No, I can't. I can't do it either. I think Roland.
I'd be perfectly happy to have Roland in that position. I don't find you to be polarizing at all.
Maybe a little polarization would be good.
I'm comfortable with it, but again, whatever.
Okay.
Okay.
Whatever the will of.
I'd like to nominate Roland Benjamin
Wait,
for the alternate.
Can we vote on both of them together and then be done with this?
Oh, you've already done Henry. You gotta.
Oh, that's right. That's right. Sorry, I forgot we'd already done Henry.
I've
Okay,
already nominated Roland, so I need a second.
I'll second.
Aye.
And all in favor?
Aye.
Say aye.
Hi.
All opposed? Hearing none. You're it, Roland.
Okay.
Okay, good. Let's talk about something real.
All right, this mission statement was just a scrape off the wall, literally. So there should be, we should all think about a decent mission statement.
Okay, can we come back to this?
Okay.
Can we maybe think about the order in which we want to go after the different committees or portions of the administration so that we have, we come out of this meeting with a work plan for next month?
Yeah. Well, Susan, you want to do economic development first? Since you and I are both on that committee already, we're fairly well versed in what they're doing.
Okay, we could do that. And there's a meeting coming up in a week, I think.
Yep, that's correct.
All right, so why don't we ask them what Henry and I can ask the Economic Development Committee.
Okay. And how about planning as second? I put planning down because there's a lot going on. Or should it be the school committee? You know?
Well, I think it doesn't matter. We're just trying to find out what people feel in these groups feel they need help with in terms of analyzing problems. We're just trying to get a sense of that. So I don't think there's any I think the question really is are there any of these we shouldn't talk to, and who would be willing to go and talk to each of these committees? Or
I'd be willing, if we're just talking about like who can approach. I mean, other people can. I don't know if we want to do this piece collaboratively as well, but I would be interested in talking to either planning and or affordable housing. And so that's something I can volunteer for, and I'd be happy to do that with somebody, or approach on my own.
I personally
with the committee, you know.
I think it's good if we send 2 people, actually.
I can do that with you.
Good.
Can I ask a question about procedure? Because I'm just thinking, if we're gathering information from other committees, that requires them to discuss amongst themselves what they believe to be the priorities or the needs are. So that really needs to happen in an open meeting. And we can't do this in like a community comment because it's not an agenda item. So really what we have to do is get this on as an agenda item in these committee meetings in advance, and then organize ourselves to attend the meetings and have that conversation with each of the committees. So it's a little bit more than just a conversation, I think, in terms of OMA, unless I'm understanding things differently.
Well, Lauren, it's Henry. What you can do, there's nothing to stop you from, for example, I've had more than one conversation with Abel Collins. I'm just socializing an idea. So it's just him and me. So it doesn't violate any open meeting standards. Once you start getting 3, 4, 5 people, sitting around, then you start running into a little bit of trouble.
Right, but don't you want the committee's
We want the
input? We don't want just one person's feedback speaking for a whole committee when they're making decisions about what data they need. It really needs to be a discussion amongst them that comes back to us. So, I mean, that's my feeling about it is, like I can call up Able too, or any of the 7 school committee members personally, but that's not then representing the whole committee. That's that one person's perspective. So I just throw this out there as I think it's a little bit more involved than just a casual conversation over coffee.
I think that's right. And if I may, I'd suggest the easiest way to do it is to send correspondence to the committees asking to be on their next agenda. The correspondence itself should make it to the agenda and therefore is a subject of discussion. It's also possible for any committee to discuss add an item to their agenda for discussion purposes. They can't vote on it. They can't take action on it. But even if you were to just show up at a meeting and ask that an item be added to the agenda for discussion purposes, you could have that conversation. Probably the best way to do it, though, is to send an email off to the chairman of the committee and say, we're from the statistical and modeling committee, and we'd like to come talk to you about what's going on with your committee and data needs. And I'm sure everybody's going to be more than happy to have you come in and talk.
Sure.
The question is really just coordinating it, getting those emails out early enough so that you can get on the agenda so that you've got something to talk about next month. That's going to be a bit of a trick. You can do it with EDC. They're a week out still. Planning, you're going to make it because they meet 2 or 3 times between work sessions and regular sessions. The school committee may be difficult to get on an agenda before and have something to report back at your next meeting. Affordable Housing Collaborative, I don't know their schedule at this point, so I can't tell you. I just don't know.
What about sustainability?
sustainability isn't on this list anymore.
Yeah.
Sustainability is, I don't know their schedule right now. I don't recall.
On this list, though?
Sure, Henry's got it as other, but yes, I mean, there's really a ton of, we have 23 or 24 committees in town hall, and they all have interesting puzzles that they're trying to work through. I mean, even you know, some of the more specialized committees like the Route 1 Scenic Highway Committee, you know, they probably have some interesting issues they'd like to talk about.
Okay, well, does anybody?
It makes sense to, you know, well, hold on, let me do this. I'm going to share, I'm going to pull up the committee list so we've got it. So you've got the Affordable Housing Collaborative, the Assessment Board of Review, could be interesting.
Can you share your screen?
Oh, I thought I was, I'm sorry, hold on. Have you got it now?
Yeah, thank you.
Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee. The Building Code Board of Appeals is probably not one that is going to be all that interesting to talk to. Canvassing Authority, not so much, although maybe could be an interesting set of questions in Conservation Commission, Economic Development, Historic District Commission, the Housing Authority, Library Board of Trustees, not so much, but maybe. The Planning Board, the Recreation Commission, all sorts of interesting questions around recreation facilities and that kind of thing.
Could I make a suggestion that, you know, some of these committees, Rob, as you're going through them, you know these committees well and who, you know, would or wouldn't maybe have appropriate needs. But could I suggest that if at least just by email, we at least contact all the committees to, inform them of our committee and what we do. If not, you know, actually go to the meeting if we don't think it's a committee that's, you know, sort of primed for our services. I think we should at least have maybe a standard communication that they all receive, just informing them of what our committee can do.
That's great.
And the other thing is that which of these committees actually collects any data? You know, I think about the Economic Development Committee doesn't collect anything.
You're
So-
right. Most of these committees operate without data, which is one of the reasons why the SMART committees come into being, because we have that problem. We've got a lot of committees giving advice to the council, but they're not operating with data. They're operating, you know, based largely on opinions, or maybe there's some information that they've got gleaned from national studies or something. The Bike Pedestrian Committee's probably got more real local data than anybody on the top part of that list. Affordable Housing's got some local data they've gleaned from the Housing Authority and the Planning Department. The Assessment Board of Review is a source of data. That real information about the values of properties and what people are appealing, and there's not a lot of appeals, but associated with that committee, there are data. Conservation Commission, not so much. Housing Authority, very limited. Interesting, but limited. Planning Board data. The Rec Commission, probably another rich source of data because they keep track of program participation. School Building Committee, not much data. Frustratingly, not enough.
What's the Waterfront Advisory Commission? Well, who are they?
The Waterfront Advisory Commission is basically the harbor master and the folks who deal with the waterfront property that the town owns, the park at Marina Park, the boat launches, town docks, and town mooring fields.
Yeah, okay.
While this is jumping around a teeny bit, it's not just the committees that are collecting data that we're interested in, it's also how to connect them with the existing data needs and what can they do and what can't they do, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, a lot of it is, I think some of them that are collecting or utilizing data already might be well served to have a resource in best practices and analysis, or is it appropriate data, or how to utilize and leverage, what can you leverage from what you have. But in many instances, it does seem as though there's just a fundamental need to make that our committee is the intersection between the need and the existing data structures, if they're there, in terms of evaluation and analysis.
I don't disagree with that. I just thought it would be helpful as a sort of baseline to know what the town does have.
If you want to think of it in a different way, if you want to think about which committees sort of have the instinct, you know, who are going to want to figure out how to design good studies or how to analyze the data that exists but they don't know about, or just sort of puzzle through the problem. I think, you know, there are committees that jump out as just having that instinct or that habit of mind. I think the Affordable Housing Collaborative, I think the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee, I think the Sustainability Committee, certainly. I think the Recreation Commission. I'd suggest the Economic Development Committee sort of has some of those instincts, but there's a lot of history around anecdotal analyses in that committee as well. So that's a harder one to sort of predict in terms of how to build those.
Well, I do know they did once do that survey. They tried to find out
Oh, yeah.
what businesses were in town and how many employees did they have, and there was some, that was the closest they got in my experience.
Yeah.
So, but I think you're right. I think these other committees are more. Can you scroll down again?
Sure.
What about the Housing Authority?
I think that actually, you've got housing authority commissioners now who are very eager to learn how to do housing better. So yes, you've got a willing audience there. It's just such a tough problem. It's a really hard problem to tackle. Although maybe a housing authority and affordable housing collaboration with the SMART committee could work. If you took on housing as an issue, you'd want to bring both the affordable housing collaborative and the housing authority into that conversation.
Yeah, well, it maybe even the Historic District Commission would have something to say for that too. I don't know.
Possibly. I mean, again, I think that, institutional habits are important to take into consideration when you're thinking about which clients you want to work with initially.
Yeah, you're right.
So recognizing we would only have certain amount of capacity, this may not be a good idea, but would we want to just send communication to all the committees with, bring awareness that the SMART committee exists. We're looking to help. We're looking to help develop the data that might be of assistance to them and see who comes back interested. Or is that just going to befuddle all these other committees that they're not even going to know what we're talking about?
So I think that the committees that I've seen be successful are the ones where the members engage and feel, get some satisfaction from being engaged. I like the idea of having particular liaisons or particular ambassadors from the committee reach out to a subset. I think it's personal. It's not just an email from the meeting organizer or coordinator or from somebody else. It's a couple of people showing up and having a conversation. I think that does matter. I think it makes a difference in the quality of the conversation. And I think it changes the way you as a committee are going to perceive the input. You're gonna understand it because you've talked to the people.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about that from the context of, right now we're kind of, in a way we would be cherry picking who to approach. And maybe it's, maybe that's the wrong characterization. So maybe it's a fine process. And I do like the idea of the personalization, definitely. But I just, I don't know how we choose where to start. Although I think that the short list that we had was good, but I don't know if somebody scrutinizes, well, how did you decide to approach those 6 committees or however many there is, what would our answer be really? Yeah, it certainly wasn't based on data.
No, but Rob said it was based on proclivity or interest in the kind of in a certain form of problem solving. So that could be our basis for making the list.
I mean, I don't think that the people on the Historic District Commission, for example, don't like data or wouldn't be interested in statistics, but the committee is built very much around historic information. It's much more about, was this property listed? What are the characteristics of a structure? It's not about statistical analyses or using numbers as a way of understanding, concretizing the body of knowledge that they're working with. The Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee, all about, number of links in a roadway, number of segments that have problems, they're all about counting things and looking at the relationships between counts. That's what they do.
Okay, so shall we, what have we decided? We've decided, Rob, are you going to send, Henry going to draft and you're going to send an email to all the committees and then we're going to.
So I'm happy to do that. I'm suggesting that it might make sense for you guys to pick a couple yourselves and just do it. Reach out to them, send them an email.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, well, here's a thought. Since both Susan and I are on the Economic Development Commission, we do a dry run, so to speak, with them, and we can do it next week. It's just send Larry an email saying that we'd like to get on your agenda and like to discuss what's going on with the SMART Committee and how it interrelates what's going on with the Economic Development Commission. Then get some feedback and see what happens. And then that might be able to furnish us with a model for future meetings with other committees.
So, Henry, I have
What do you
no
think?
qualm with that. I have no qualm with that, but I will tell you, I do not believe that the Economic Development Committee is your most successful first project.
No, I don't either. I
It's
agree.
a hard problem.
Yeah.
Okay, I just tossed it out there, Susan.
Yeah,
What
I
do you
agree.
think?
He's right. So Jonathan and Kirsten, you were interested in going to who? I've already forgotten.
Planning and affordable housing,
Planning and affordable housing.
potentially, at the pleasure of the committee.
Well, Kirsten, you have anything to say about that? Can you and Jonathan figure that out for the next meeting?
So here's, I think, the issue that I'd like to make sure that we resolve in this meeting first, is what do we tell them about us?
Yeah,
This is what our committee is. We are available for data analysis, for identifying data sources that you may need, for help and consultation, in answering and addressing questions that you may have. But I think we need to have a message that's pretty clear. Not that our committee is here to, we had talked previously about reviewing existing reports or what does existing data from the state mean as one of the potential tasks of this committee. And so I do think we need a spiel or a set of, these are things that we can do for you, maybe, if the data exists, right? And that, what we would like is potentially then any sort of priority items that you would like us to put under consideration for the committee to work on. But I do feel like we need that pitch about what we do instead of saying we do data stuff, because that is too vague.
Yeah. Okay, so maybe that's the assignment for next meeting, is to figure out among ourselves, we just have to figure out how we do that outside of the meeting.
If I could make a suggestion, there's I have a copy of the public notice that went out regarding public service appointments that included a description of this committee. That's a pretty good starting point. If we could dig that up and then use that as a basis.
Hey, Rob, do we have that out there so we can take a look at it?
I don't know. I don't know what you're looking at, Dave.
I've got it in print. I actually think I printed it off the town's website at some point when
I think I have a draft of that Rob, I worked on with you. But
It's
it's not fully comprehensive, and other good ideas have been mentioned here, but it's at least a piece of paper with some writing on it to start with.
But I think Kristen's suggestion is right. You need an elevator pitch to make to the people you're going to go talk to, and whatever the formal statement of purpose is, whatever the charge of the committee is, you still need to be able to describe that in, you know, a 30-second, 3-minute, and 30-minute sort of format. We don't need 30 minutes yet, but 30 seconds, 3 minutes would be good.
so how do we get that? Because I don't feel as though we can get that through a meeting.
I think you're right. It could be an assignment. You know, you go each take a whack at what you would say about the consulting service that this committee has to offer. You know, what is it that you think individually you think the committee might be able to add value by doing?
And then should we send those to somebody willing to sort of,
That's Henry Thayer.
Yeah.
okay, we send them to Henry?
Yes.
Might I suggest that we also take a look at committees and just, not to say cherry pick, but we could also perhaps look at the calendar. Like I just had the calendar up on my other screen, trying to see where could we actually start to target this so that there's actually movement into the next meeting with some structure around where we would go when. And maybe there are committees that are too big to start off with, like we don't want to take on the largest question initially, but there may be some just practical elements that lend themselves to the organization of this.
Okay, well, that's 2 assignments right there. That's good, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. An elevator pitch and
Yeah, and a,
preference list, if you will, or a target list for each member.
Maybe we could even check our own availability for that so that we could just start to really assign people.
after we see the pattern of the committee's meetings?
Yeah, like I'm not, maybe they're not all up on the town calendar, but like I can see when, you know, in early August, some of these committees, you know, it looks like the meeting schedules, and certainly they might not all stay. Like it looks like there was a meeting today that was canceled, right? But it might be useful to just think about like who's available, who would approach it, so that we could be strategic rather than delayed in the process.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. All right, good.
I had one other thought from our last meeting, which I don't want to overload us, but we seem eager to get to work. One of the other things that did come up that Rob had suggested was bringing in some folks to just talk about the data they're collecting and how it's held.
Absolutely.
And maybe we could start doing that the next meeting so that we're moving in
Yes.
simultaneous and complementary directions, so that we're building a sense of what is out there, what different departments or different offices in the town are collecting. And then we could have these kind of simultaneous assignments in terms of what are the needs, but also then some folks that are looking at the quality, structure, organization, and availability of the data after those offices are reporting out. It's a thought, but I really did like that idea. I don't want that thread to get lost.
Yeah, that is a good idea. I agree.
Excellent.
Should we
So-
start with
I'm sorry, Susan.
no, go ahead.
I would suggest I'll be happy to reach out, and Henry, if you remind me, it'll actually happen. We can get the sergeant who does our traffic counts. So you get the police data on traffic flows. That's an interesting, that's a set of data that's pretty prevalent. There's a lot of data that we collect on speeds and all sorts of interesting data. I'm sure that would be an interesting person to hear from. And we might talk to the town tax assessor.
Yeah, the tax assessor, I think he would be a really important one to start with. Or, I mean, to be in the early days. Because that must be the biggest, he must be the biggest data collector.
He's got a lot of data, although, so I think that the conversation with Sergeant Souza about the traffic data could be done in 15 or 20 minutes.
Yeah.
I think that the assessor's data set discussion is, you know, you get the 5-minute version, you get the 55-minute version. It all depends on how deep and detailed you want to have the conversation.
We want more than 5 minutes from him.
Yeah.
So do we want to do 2 in a meeting?
I think it makes sense to for the next meeting because we won't have these report outs from committees and their needs. So it might be good to kind of pack it that way.
Yeah, okay.
Sounds good, Krista.
The other one that would be really easy to sort of start with maybe is construction data, building permits, that kind of thing. That's a relatively brief conversation. Violations, the building inspector would be probably a 10 or 15-minute conversation. And it's interesting data too, you know, so.
Let's see who's available.
Okay. Henry, coordinate with Colleen, make sure that Colleen, you tell them and we'll get it done.
Yeah, because, you know, somebody's got to tell these guys it's okay to meet with Henry or whoever.
Well, we're going to have them show up at the next Zoom meeting.
Yeah, okay.
They'll attend.
They'll know who we are.
Right.
Yeah, they need to know what we're looking for.
Yep. Yeah, I need to have a quick conversation with each of them.
Yeah.
Because I think, I mean, we're looking at even the structure and how they're recording and reporting and units, and is it in the same place, and how easy is it to access, and how hard is it for them to get it to us, and because we could start to sketch out what a data dictionary would look like from this, and then we are starting to build multiple avenues of the structure of the committee's work, I think.
Okay, good. This is exciting. This is more progress than we've made.
Yeah.
See that? You hire yourself a meeting coordinator and everything gets easy.
Okay, so did we cover our agenda?
There was on the agenda the same items as last meeting, including the COVID stuff. And I did want to bring to the committee, I had a conversation with the superintendent today, and we've had a number of conversations over the last several weeks. There's a lot of frustration around, and we talked a little bit about this last week, or last meeting, around the overwhelming number of data points and studies and stuff dealing with COVID, and yet not having anything that you can really take action on. So there's a real need for an assessment of research that is applicable locally. So if you see anything in your wide readings that just looks like, yeah, this could be helpful, this is an analytical approach, or these data tell us something important that might be replicable or may be, helpful in understanding what's going on locally, we're dying for that. there's a lot of information out there, but there's just not, the culling process is not great. There's not a good way for us to figure out what's really useful. So it's not a very clear expression of the problem, but that's sort of the problem. It's not easy to identify how to work with the wide range of studies and reports and data sets and all this other stuff that's out there. I mean, the numbers that we've got, as we discussed last meeting, are pretty limited. You know, we've gone up six cases in South Kingstown since the last time we spoke. Okay, what do you do with that? There's, you know, that doesn't help us. It's not a particularly important thing to know. And yet we have all of these very interesting, challenging problems that have to be tackled. And, you know, we've got very little useful information or knowledge or even frameworks.
One thought that on that specifically is I'm guessing they're going to be looking for the different types of indicators that would trigger a decision, whatever that is, whether it's moved from one scenario to another. There are individuals, I know it was Colleen Smith before in the school district, but they have access to something called KidsNet, which is an interface that the school districts have with the Department of Health, which is tied into pediatricians. It might be helpful. What you've got, it's a problem that we're defining in everything here. You've got somebody that might be able or have access to something and then not even know what they have access to because their job has been a school administrator, not a data analyst or even somebody that knows what they can see. So I'd maybe recommend having somebody take a look at all of that and say, what can we access through KidsNet? There are definitely places that they use it even for just population counts and that kind of thing, but there's got to be something bigger, like number of sick calls or something like that might be accessible, that would be more helpful than the once every 3 week number that comes in from the state that says here's how many in their zip codes. You know, I don't know. I don't know if that
kids what?
KidsNet. It's run through that's run through the Department of Health, but then it's shared to school districts. So there was somebody managing that in the school district, but maybe also someone from the town that, and then interface with the Department of Health as well. To say what else can we get out of this? Assuming there's nobody at the Department of Health or the Department of Education already trying to figure that out for districts. You know, it'd be hard for me to believe that I'm the first one to think of that, but.
You know, well, Roland, there's one thing, if I can digress for a moment. There's one thing where I know there's a lot of data as far as teacher absences due to sickness, and that's the ASOP system.
That's it,
you know,
right?
Because they have to go in there and they have to put their absence in. So that data is out there in some format.
Yeah, maybe there's some way that they could connect all those together and make some usable metric. I don't know.
Yeah. There's one other thing that's as far as a usable metric, and I really like to know what this is. Rob, the town beach, are we restricted to like 25% of capacity?
We're restricting town beach, the town beach to 800 people total, including town staff, lifeguards, 800 people.
Yeah, do we have any counts as to how many of those cars are from out of state? How many are local in terms of local residents?
Yeah, in the town beach parking lot, we are required to allow some number of day passes. And right now we're issuing about 200 day passes on the weekends, each weekend day.
Okay.
Of the 800 people, 200 passes, 200 of the 200 of the cars in the parking lot could be out of staters. The balance though, and it's not 200 out of 800 parked cars, but whatever the on the beach,
Yeah.
whatever it is, the balance, most of the parked cars in our parking lot are town residents with season passes.
Right. Okay.
It's well, it's over, 400, it's over 500.
Yeah.
Probably not 600.
Okay. Okay, do we have anything else?
Were we tackling the mission statement or no? Or is
Not
that
as,
some-
I don't think as
that's
a committee, that's a good idea.
Huh?
I don't think that's a good idea as a committee. If some people want to write something down. I mean, actually, the SMART statement that Rob wrote that organized this committee has got most of the elements, I think.
I'll pull that back. And David, you've got that as well, or you've got something, it sounds like it might be.
It might be the same thing. I'm not sure.
So let's just work with that next meeting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
And you'll also have your elevator speeches. So
Right.
that'll help.
I got it all written down.
Was there something on the agenda, I'm not looking at it now, about a tax assessment tool, or it's tax something or other?
Yeah, it's that same tax calculator that we started talking about way back in January. It's still a tool that needs to be finalized and put out there somehow. It's just never been, since COVID, it's just never been the right time to focus on getting that thing out there.
Okay.
I'm going to keep it on the agenda though, because I do think that eventually we're going to get back to a budget process, and having a tool for people to use during the budget process will be helpful.
Okay.
Quick, actually. Yeah. We'll be back into the budget in no time.
Yeah.
A lot of red ink in that budget?
It's a very complicated problem. I mean, just the budget this year, state revenues are down $480,000. State revenue to the town of South Kingstown are down $480,000. Building permits are down. Revenues are going to be significantly lower than they were last year, and they're significantly lower than were projected when we put the budget together. We're managing that. It's not, it's not disastrous. We'll slow hire. We'll hold off on some capital projects. It's not a miserable problem. But last night, the schools presented a COVID expense sheet that had $4.5 million worth of uncovered expenses. So that's going to be an interesting conversation. I don't know when and how that will resolve, but it will resolve.
What happened with the vote?
Yeah.
So the budget referendums were very close. Both the proposed reduction for the schools and the proposed reduction for the municipal budget failed by 17 votes in one case and 34 votes in the other.
Oh my gosh.
Out of like 3,000 votes,
3,000.
something like 3,000 votes cast. Yeah, so it was like less than 1%.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Yep. And if you don't think voting matters, we actually missed the requirement for a recount by one vote.
Wow. Okay.
Rob, can I ask a question? I mean, not to go back when we're wrapping up, but I keep thinking about this COVID-related issue. And, I don't think there's just going to be data lying around. So I think we need to think about, like, a priori, what does the town, like if there's all these questions and there's
Right.
something that you want, I think for the town, we maybe this is for our next meeting even, just to think through, like brainstorm, what would you like to know? What are the data that you would need to make decisions that you need to make for safety and other things?
Right.
And we may have to develop some systems for gathering those data, whether it's related to, you know, like restaurant operations or the beach or something related to the schools. You know, I don't think these data are just, I mean, where the science is right now is like on trying to understand the microbiology of the virus and what are the interventions that are being delivered in the ICU and what medications, you know, they're not thinking, I just think it's going to be, we're going to have to decide and plan and collect data on our own if there's something we want, but we need to know what are the questions that you have.
So I keep wanting to come back to the idea that I'd like to have a pipeline of data-driven best practices. You know, what's working in Germany? What's working in Japan? And every time I read about Japan, I get excited about it. And then I realize, no. There's this major problem with that article or this. And we don't have anybody who's sort of scanning, not in town hall anyway, we don't have anybody who's scanning the scientific or the, you know, even the public policy literature to see what's working. You know, what do you do? And it's not that it's working because somebody says so. It's working because they did a good study, they collected the data, they demonstrated that it does in fact have a positive outcome. We don't have a pipeline for that stuff. We're relying on the same sort of popular media that everybody else is relying on, and it's not very reliable. You know, it's just not a good source of data. You get excited about what you read about. You know, I read an article about Hokkaido and Hakodate, Japan, and you know the second wave that happened there, and very interesting, detailed analysis of how they ran into a problem. But it's not science. It's you know, anecdotal information reported by either a reporter or, you know, a science reporter maybe, but it's not, you know, it's not great stuff. So if there are truly peer-reviewed scientific studies that we should be seeing, they're not coming to us. There's not a pipeline to the town administration.
Well,
Rob, can I ask a quick question?
Yeah.
Are you interested in like what are best practices in terms of sanitation, which is much more likely to exist than like what are, you know, the behavioral interventions that are effective for subpopulations, which is probably happening right now, right?
Yeah.
So as Lauren indicated, part of our problem is that the data is not there. Like people are actively engaged in collecting this stuff right now. Like I have a research project that's working on this, but we're like pre-stage to the actual collection. So I think one of the realities is if there are really specific things that would guide policy, that data is probably not there. And we probably would need to design or think about some instrument or strategy for either utilizing a viable proxy or actually executing a study. And so, I mean, I think this is one of those instances where the town really needs to tell us what they need to know.
So on some level, we don't need to know anything. And I don't mean to sound too cute about that, but when you don't know the strength of the materials you're working with, you overbuild. And we are in the process right now of overbuilding. The reason I resisted very strongly reducing our budget at the beginning of the budget process was I wanted to preserve flexibility over the course of a year. We sent everybody home because that was the best way to make sure that we didn't have anybody kind of coming in. We're just overbuilding every solution right now because it's the surest way to make sure that we don't get ourselves into unintended problems. Um, what the problems we face are the problems every organization faces. It's what you or I faces. It's what every organization is facing. We don't have any different problem than anybody else. What I'd like to be able to do, though, is move away from just brute force solutions sooner rather than later. And again, what we're relying on are the same sources of information or prediction, or the same strategies that everybody else has got access to, either through the popular press or through the political channels from the governor's office, what have you. I just want to, if it's possible, I want to be in a position where we're early adopters of the less overbuilt system. As soon as we know we can go to a system that is not overbuilt, I want that engineered solution as soon as possible. I want to know that the data is there, and I want to apply that solution as quickly as possible. I mean, you know, masks are a silly example, but a very simple, elegant solution to a problem. And we didn't, as a nation, really fully appreciate that for a while, which was a weird thing. And I feel like that exists, that problem exists with regard to almost everything, almost every part of dealing with COVID. If we knew sooner that just wearing masks was going to solve a problem, I might not have had to send everybody home. I might not have had to buy as many laptops as I bought.
Wow.
I think the problem, I have a daughter who lives in Berlin, and she's getting ready August 20th to send her kid back to school because German schools are opening up. But there's not going to be a public policy study of what's there. You know, my granddaughter is guinea pig number 12 or something. You know, she's going back into a classroom. They're talking about small, you know, all the same stuff. There'll be little groups, they'll stay together all day, they'll, you know, that whatever they, but in terms of knowing whether that works, there's no answer to that yet, because they haven't tried it yet. They haven't, you know, they've got a plan that they're going to follow, but they don't know whether it works. I mean, one of the things they're doing, which you have mentioned, is they do know where all the teachers live. And so one of the things they're thinking about, since it's Berlin, it's a big city, and the teachers are coming from lots of different places. So some teachers are not coming back because they come from a portion of Berlin, a place in Berlin where COVID is a little bit more prevalent. I mean, these are really small, this could be overbuilding too, but you know, so that's the kind of thing they're talking about now, but there's no study yet. Even the other European cities where the schools have opened, I think it's just way too early to know what is successful and why.
Well, and I would add too, I have a friend, I mean, this is anecdotal, but a friend, I mean, I'm just looking up, there's some news reports about this. A friend in Israel, they reopened the schools, and then the cases in the schools spiked, and all these schools had to close indefinitely. And now they're talking about closing all the schools again.
Yeah.
So, and they had a whole protocol and system with the small groups and the contact tracing and the whole thing. So it's like, these are mini experiments that are happening in vivo. And, you know, it's not like you can't do a randomized trial of any of this. You can't randomize some people to one condition or another. We're all living it, and we're all, you know, doing this as we're living it. So, you know, but I do think though, if you have specific, you know, sort of this overbuilt issue, if there's certain things that you can identify concretely that you're overbuilding, then we can work backwards from that and say, okay, if this is the issue, what data could be available to help inform your decision making about that, about whether it's too big or if you could scale back. But I think, at least for me, I don't have a good sense of what those things are. when you, I mean, I understand the concept of what you're saying in terms of the flexibility and kind of taking the most conservative approach, which might ultimately be the most costly or the most, you know, impairing in terms of day-to-day operations. But if we can get a little bit more concrete, then I think we can be creative about some ideas about what kind of data could inform those decisions, and we could take a data-driven approach to those questions. I just personally don't know what those are. So
Yeah, maybe this is something we could spend a little time talking about at the next meeting. Let me think about, and you know, let me think about this, because I've had some thoughts about it since our last conversation, where I basically threw my hands up and said, you know, we can't do anything here. This is just too much chaos. There's not going to be any way to organize all of these disparate data. I'm not there anymore. I think that there is going to be something that we can do with the information that we've got. And there's probably information out there that would help inform us better than we are now. And I still don't know. I don't know how to frame the issue either. I don't know how to even describe. So is it sanitation? Yes, we've got sanitation issues. I don't want to dive into, you know, the minutia though. I'm looking for a more global approach to identifying solutions as they become apparent anywhere. I'm sorry.
Yeah, but those might not be peer reviewed. I mean, that might be sort of.
That's true.
Anecdote. I mean, the Israel thing is interesting. I have friends in Israel too, whose kids went to school and are now home from school because they thought they knew what they were doing and they're home. And maybe my granddaughter in Berlin will be home too. I mean, I don't know, but.
I mean, I think the one thing that we could do in a concrete way that would at least be useful is to coordinate with URI as students are starting to come back.
Yep.
And their data collection process, and really, I mean, I know a lot of them will also be in Narragansett, but we have this, right now we have a huge tourist population, and then we're going to have a huge resident student population. And
Right.
some of those systemic challenges are very similar and some are different, but they do have a very targeted data collection strategy, and just even opening up the lines of communication and speedy transfer of information, if they're willing to do it, would be really useful.
Yes, we've started those conversations. And in fact, I'll tell you, you want to talk about concrete sort of actionable things. My conversations with URI make me nervous, because I think that the strategy URI is using may be problematic for the community. I mean, essentially the strategy is make room for the out-of-state kids by sending the in-state kids home, which means we're going to have more commuting from communities outside of the area on a daily basis. So we've got many more contacts with other, to use the school district's thing, other pods. So we've got cross-pod contamination increasing as a result of the university trying to reduce the harm to the out-of-state and foreign students. We're going to have an in-state cross-pod contamination problem here. And that also is going to radically change, I think, our traffic patterns, because in most years, we've got kids coming out of Narragansett, they come from the south into URI. We're going to have kids coming out of the north, which we don't typically see. And the road network to the north is not particularly good. So those are concrete problems that are COVID related. But again, they're kind of one-off problems. The solution to that is going to be figure out how to use shuttle buses, and you know, we're going to work through that as problems manifest.
It may be that the reduced in-person classes compensate for a lot of that.
Yeah.
It may be. I am nervous about the cross-pod contamination problem. I don't love the idea of more commuters in a pandemic.
And maybe there's a way, I mean, this is something URI, it's really more of a URI question, but, you know, to look at if, you know, as cases as they're identifying cases in the URI population, you can look at whether they're in residence on campus or if they're coming from commuting locations, and you can actually look at that as a hypothesis that we anticipate that there'd be greater rates of COVID in the commuting students than in the students in residence. And that's something you can evaluate. I don't know if they would release those kinds of data to us, because the other issue with this is that this is health data.
That's
and
right.
People get very, and this is my field, people get very, very antsy about health data and HIPAA, and even when they're de-identified and in aggregate, they get funky and weird about it. So
I do think URI's got a really good surveillance and health monitoring program set up. I mean, that actually is a very strong system.
Yeah, but that would be good to know, because if it's coming from the commuters, that does impact the town, right? Like if we could get, even if it's just a report from URI.
One of the problems is they may have a great system. The kid's going to have to walk into classroom, show his cell phone with the green health icon popped up, but he's already stopped at a coffee shop and a gas station before he gets there. So, if we turn him away at the classroom, it's too late for the guy at the coffee bar or the gas station or what have you. The commuter strategy makes me nervous, but it is what it is.
Okay. We ready to adjourn? Okay, motion to adjourn, please.
Second that.
Please.
Yeah, David,
I seconded your motion, if that was a motion.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, the
Good night.
meeting.
Thank you, folks.
Stay well, everybody.
yeah,
There, everybody.
thank you. Oh, and Henry, if you want to talk about what we do with the EDC, let me know.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, bye.
Bye-bye.